hater deficiencies. I write down my epiphanies for the people in misery. I just hope
Popped
that
off
you
yet,
get
but
me,
I
got
know
me
it will.
probably in history.
Cause
I
like
just want you to
LA is
mention me
like
before
thirsty
you
for
have to
that too
remember
still,
me.
like that
Energy got me living,
real
synergy
other
got me
hip hop
singing with
side, you know what I
everything
mean?
I
Like
believe in, from
we
Mother
got our
Earth to
turned
the
up shit
heathens.
at
I'm
all
deeper than
times.
any
That's
deacon and
always like
realer
in the
than any
bag, and
reverend. I
that's
surely
it's
did it
fire
for
for what it
myself
is
and I
too.
also did it
But
for my
then there's
brethren.
always been like those other people like a Kendrick even, or like a Blue, or even like a Schoolboy, like somebody who's still like banged out and thugging but still got bars and like, you know, could really like rap type stuff, or
Right.
J Rock or somebody. So
I
yeah, I
wrote
think it's just like about that.
I wrote down all those names. I'm gonna look into all those artists. I don't really listen to the radio that much. Like when I drive, I listen to podcasts or books on tape or a playlist that I made. So I don't really have a way to
Yeah.
discover new music unless people tell me about it. You know what I mean?
Oh
Like
yeah.
I super appreciate L for putting me on because that whole underground scene, I probably would not have been aware of it, you know? I mean,
Yeah.
like back in the day, I would listen to, like the Wake Up Show, or I would listen to, those late shows on Q104.7 in Ventura. They would play. First time I heard Slum Village, something underground that people weren't
Mm,
playing, that I discovered from late night DJs. But I don't
yeah.
know. I just feel like I'm just not in tune with it right now. So I need
Yeah.
people like you that are working with these artists that are living the life to like put me on to new hot beats.
Yeah.
I need that.
Yeah.
There is a song that 7 Grams made. Let me see if I can play just a little piece of it real quick.
I'm trying to rhyme a rhyme and where would I flow? I ain't got shit except my car, my bars, my art, and my froze. And all of
Oh,
the
you
sounds
know
it
what's
doesn't
crazy,
matter.
bro?
Stay on key and low.
I
Never
started
change.
that beat.
Deficiency with hater deficiencies. I write down my epiphanies for the people in misery. I just hope that you getting me, got me probably in history. I just want you to mention me before you have to remember me. Energy got me living, synergy got me singing with everything I believe in, from Mother Earth to the heathens. I'm deeper than any deacon and realer than any reverend. I surely did it for myself and I also did it for my brethren. I
Woo-wee.
wanna become a
Yeah,
legend.
what's
You
crazy
I
made
know
is
that?
that take work,
I
but when I
started
ain't had
that
no
beat,
work, you
and then
don't think I
Seven
know what it's
Grams
worth. The
helped me with
same
it,
day
and the
you
homie
start to that
Stills helped me
breathtaking
with
me
it, and
dream.
then
I would
Van
rather
Clayton
make a
played
movie
keys.
first,
But yeah, I
rather make a
started that
scene.
beat.
I just do my thing.
Cascade
Got your nigga
Dreams.
clapping
Yes,
hands.
Yeah, that's fire, man. Yeah, that's one of my favorite songs ever. That was like probably my
bro,
favorite beat I ever made.
bro. I made a playlist on SoundCloud because of that song. I was like, I need to save this and let me find more just fresh music to go with it.
That's fire.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I
I like
love
that
that.
song, man. That's dope, man. That's super
Your
dope.
guys' styles go together really well. I don't know what it is, but I feel like
It's
y'all
because
can
Belvy is
match.
like, he's like my best friend too. Pistol and Belvy are like my best friends, and so like I've walked around with Belvy hella late at night in Inglewood from the studio playing NERD and shit. So it's just like a different connection, you know. When you play NERD with somebody and walk through the hood, like you got a certain bond that
Right.
shows up in the music.
Now he seems extremely intelligent, extremely like I don't know, self-aware. He's got
Super,
some vibe about him that
super.
I would love to have a conversation with that dude. Like
You
I
know what?
dig
He'd
his
be a
music.
great interview for you, bro. He'd be an
Yeah.
incredible interview. He's one of the best speakers, especially on the level of like really conveying his message to you. You know, just through good like regular down to earth talking. It's pretty cool. He understands many perspectives, and even throughout music too. He's very able to do that while he's rapping, which is I think what makes his verses like so dope.
Yeah.
Cause like a lot of people feel like there's people who are smart as hell, you know, who know a bunch of words and know how to speak really well, but they can't rap that entirely. So like that part is a talent in its own.
It is. It is. It's prolific. It's when I think
Yeah,
about the art of rap, like this is probably one of my favorite conversations to have. A debate about where it comes from. Like where does the ideas come from, the inspiration, the creativity, the flow, the
yeah,
freestyle. So
yeah,
I want you to weigh in on this debate because I have this all the time. So we've all seen the Black Album documentary, and
Yeah.
Jay doesn't write anything down, right?
Yeah.
He
Facts.
he goes he blacks out, and it sounds like he freestyles it to himself, memorizes it, and then spits it.
And I'm gonna tell you
That's
it's crazy about this, bro. So me, I watched the Black Album movie obviously like 50 million times. Me and Belvy saw that movie like 2 times in the theater. I've watched it a grip of times. It's one of my favorite films. And for multiple reasons, especially the Pharrell segment. I love that part entirely. And the Timberland segment too. Well, I love the whole thing. But regardless, so that movie inspired me because Jay-Z, it was said at the time that Jay-Z, I think, and like Biggie Smalls, people said that about too, and Jadakiss, sometimes people said that about, that they just didn't write their verses down or whatever. And so when I saw that movie and I saw what Jay was doing, it inspired me kind of to do the same thing because I already didn't like writing, and my writing is terrible. It's ugly as hell. And so I haven't written a verse since that movie came out on paper either at the same time. But also, I think that gives me insight as to what I believe is people wrongfully calling that freestyling. Jay-Z is not freestyling, I don't think, in any of those situations. I think he's doing exactly what I'm doing, which is pretty much just writing a verse in your head, like line by line, like fours, and then, you feel me, you do another four, and then that's your eight, and then you do your other one, and then you do your other one, and then when you look up, you got a 16, and you just keep it going. And it seems crazy difficult, you feel me? And it might be maybe on the outside, I don't know, but it's not really. It's like, you feel me? It's just like writing on paper. It's just like if you write something down on paper and you read that enough times back to yourself, the rhythm of it is gonna make you remember it. If you have a strong enough cadence, your cadence is gonna let you know what words fit in that space. You feel me? So even if you don't have that paper, once you have that bounce in your head of like, this is how I was rapping to it, your mind is smart enough to automatically lock those words back into those spaces that you made for those cadences, which is what makes it easier than I think people would see it as. And
huh.
I only can say that because I do it all the time. Like I said, oh, my bad.
Oh,
But
you're
yeah,
good.
my bad. But yeah, I haven't written a verse since that movie. Literally since that movie came out, and
2004, 2005.
yeah, around definitely that, because I only know just because that was the movie that inspired me to do it. I was like, man, he didn't pass high school. I barely passed, and he's doing it, and I was like, it can't be that hard. And then when we started doing it, it took a while at first. At first, it was like, okay, it takes me like fucking an hour and a half to write a verse, but as time went on, and I trained my mind to like not have to depend on the paper, because that's all it is that people get into a place where they feel like, I have to look at the paper. So then you make yourself feel like I am going to forget it if I don't look back. So then you end up looking back, you feel me? As opposed to just trusting yourself and saying, nah, I'm going to remember it because what I wrote is fire. I'm not going to forget some fire shit, you feel me? Like when I forget something, usually it's because it was weak. If it was fire, I'm not forgetting it. I promise. It's stuck. Like, because you get too hyped about it. You're so hyped about what you said. You're like, oh my God, like,
Yeah.
damn, like that was fire. Like, you're not forgetting that. And
Huh.
so,
That's
like,
interesting. Yeah. So the paper,
yeah,
the pen and the paper is almost like a crutch. It's like saying, I need this to remember what I already thought of.
I think so. Yeah. I think
Hmm.
that's why people feel like they can't do it. But this is also, too, let me like take all that and say this too. Writing in your head is no worse or better than writing on paper. I think it's the exact same thing. You feel me? Like the exact same thing, damn near. Like it depends on how you think as a person. Because like, you feel me? Like for instance, Pistol McFly, he's a person who'll write on his phone. Sometimes he'll write in his head. Sometimes he'll do it many different ways. Maybe freestyle some shit sometimes. But he writes in a way that sounds hella free. It sounds like he's not writing with margins or anything like that. And originally, that's kind of why I started writing in my head, was to like kind of not have to worry about spacing and margins and all that stuff, because I feel like it kind of like, not to say that it does, but in my mind, I used to think like it boxed you a little bit, being in a formatted piece of paper or whatever. And so,
Hmm.
like, or even like a phone. And so I didn't do it. But then, like, Pistol, he kind of showed me like it doesn't matter. You can write on your phone, you can write on paper, like it doesn't matter. It's about how you think. He's a free thinker. So he raps free like that, and it sounds fire.
Hmm. That's a really interesting take on it. Yeah. I think that most people do assume if there's no pen and paper involved that it's a freestyle. And it
Yeah,
took me a while to kind of understand that. I was watching, it was a Sway interview, and he had Method Man and he had Black Thought, and they went back and forth. Did you see that by any
I
chance?
believe. Yeah. I believe I did. Yeah,
And so Method Man, he was like, "Oh, I gotta have my phone." So he pulled out his phone and he rapped a verse. Thought rapped a verse back and forth. Black Thought didn't write anything down, you know.
yeah,
And seeing that just with my eyes, I can understand. Okay, they both wrote those, but he wrote
yeah,
and memorized his in his head. He wrote his in his phone.
yeah.
It's just different.
It is. Also, too, we got to note too, though, that New York has a different definition of what a freestyle is than the West. New York's definition of a freestyle is very different. They feel like what you rapping a loose verse on a beat, another beat is a freestyle. Like if I take a verse from my album and I rap it on a Kendrick Lamar song on the radio, it's a freestyle in New York. Out here it kind of is now because like the radio stations have gone along with that format of that and calling it a freestyle, but overall from like historical time, like the West Coast used to only consider a freestyle to be like a off the top freestyle.
Off the
Yeah,
top. Yeah.
exactly. And that was like New York. Like that was always a gripe back in the days. Like I used to remember people like even like Smack DVD early, like people would be like, "Man, that's just not no freestyle." And New York would be like, "Yeah, like no, it's not. Like it's just
Yeah.
we got verses. I just got verses for days, like to spit over whatever."
Right, right. And before social media, you somebody can spit that verse in different ciphers and nobody would
Oh
know.
hell yeah, super, super. Unless you made it on Smack DVD, like you could do that thing like 20 times.
I heard Lil Wayne, that he had that. What was it? Um, I forget what it was called, but he took his notebook out, spit everything that he had written, and then basically said that he wasn't going to write anything down going forward.
Yeah,
I had heard that story, so that made me actually respect Lil Wayne in a different way. I've always liked his music, but I never put him in the top tier. Just for me, all of this is opinion.
yeah,
I'm not saying that he's better or
yeah.
worse, but I
Yeah,
was like, oh, okay, his genius is just different, you
yeah.
know.
Well, two things. All right, so because on two of those comments. So one, I was gonna say is, so Lil Wayne started a whole new wave of recording, from just what the I guess like the public would know or like the rap world would know. Wayne started the process of like bar for bar recording, or at least doing it for like the way it is now. Like if you listen to a lot of like the even the southern music nowadays, and how people sound very like random but in a cool way. You know what I mean? Like the Migos might have a verse where they're talking about the lamb, and then they're talking about getting head, and then it's about like selling a pack and then shooting somebody with a chopper. The reason like some of those sound so random and cool with like crazy flows is because like people would do 2 bar sets. You know what I mean? Like I'll do like 2 bars, and then I'll like sit back and think about something, and then come back and do another 2 bars, and then I'll sit back and think about something, and then come back and record maybe 3 bars, and then think about it, and then come back and record 4 bars, and then by the time I look up, it's like I got a 16, and it sounds like I'm like rapping like over here and over there and like over here, and I got this cadence over here, and it's like craziness. And like, so I think that's what like Lil Wayne has to get like a lot of credit for, is like a lot of people recording that styling now, like of just couple bars, pieces here, like switch the flow up every 2 bars, 1 bar, maybe even a half a bar if I want, like no format, like just rap, go crazy,
Mm.
and like running that. And then on another note, I was gonna say, I always have 2 separate lists. One is my favorite list, which Andre and Jay-Z are at the top of, and the list goes on. And then there's a list of people that I just
Talk is cheap, motherfucker.